I never thought I'd be the kind of man who stands in a hallway, holding his breath, too afraid to push a door open all the way. But that morning, I stood there with my hand on the knob, listening to the low hum of the air vents. My heart felt like it was beating in my ears. It was just supposed to be another ordinary day, work, come home, maybe grab a beer later. Instead, I found myself staring at a tiny sliver of space between the door and the frame, wondering if I should go in or walk away. I didn't do either, not right then. I just hovered there, thinking about how I'd gotten to this point in my life. 50-some years old, and I couldn't bring myself to step into my wife's office without feeling a knot in my gut. I used to handle things differently. When I was younger, I'd barge in anywhere. Didn't matter if it was some manager's office or a friend's garage. I'd knock once, then go right on through. I wasn't shy, and I wasn't afraid of what I might find. Life has a way of wearing that brashness down, though. You pick up a few dents, lose a few illusions. You start noticing small details, like how a door isn't fully shut, or how there's a weird silence where there should be voices. On that day, I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach tighten, but I couldn't see it clearly. I only saw a shadow moving across the floor, like someone was shifting around, trying to get comfortable. And there was another sound, a muffled gasp, maybe. My mind tried to pass it off as the air conditioning or some draft. But deep down I knew. Before I talk about that moment, maybe I should tell you a bit of who I was before it. My name doesn't matter much. I'm an average guy. I've worked in a factory most of my life, done some mechanical stuff on the side when money was tight. I'd been married to Cindy for a lot of years, long enough that we stopped celebrating anniversaries with anything more than a nod across the dinner table. We never had kids. Doctors said it wasn't likely to happen, and we accepted that. Or at least I did. Cindy never talked much about it, not after the first wave of disappointment. We met when I was 24 and she was 22, outside a diner off Route 10. She was on break from her shift, and I was just grabbing a coffee before heading to another job interview. I liked her right away. She was funny in a quiet way, had these eyes that made you think she was seeing right through the nonsense you were spouting. I asked for her number, and she gave it after making me wait a bit, acting all nonchalant. We dated, moved in together, then got married in a small backyard ceremony with a barbecue afterward. I liked how real she was. No pretense, just a strong woman who'd lived her own struggles. We fit. Life went on. We had our arguments, money, mostly, but we stayed together because it felt like that's what you do when you find a person who can sit with you in silence, and not make it feel weird. I never suspected she'd be unfaithful. That thought never crossed my mind. She was steady. Worked hard, took care of the house. We didn't have fireworks every day, but we had routine, which I valued more than I realized. Sometimes we'd argue. Sometimes we'd go out to the river and fish. Sometimes we'd watch late-night TV shows, her leaning on my shoulder, me dozing off after the second commercial break. It was life, nothing glamorous, but ours. And I guess that's why I felt a chill in my bones when I noticed that door was open just a crack. Because everything about that moment was wrong. A few days earlier, Cindy had mentioned a big project at her company. She worked in an administrative role, assisting her boss with schedules, budgets, all that. I never really asked for details. I trusted her to do her job. She said there would be a lot of late meetings. "Don't wait up," she told me once, giving me a peck on the cheek before heading out. And I didn't wait up. I let her come home whenever, usually dead tired, dropping her purse on the floor by the couch, slipping off her shoes. She'd say hi, then go right to bed while I watched old baseball reruns. I didn't question it. I figured that's how work gets sometimes. That morning, I'd driven over to her building because I needed the spare set of keys to our boat. We kept them in her desk drawer after the last trip, and I wanted to get out on the lake that weekend. Work had me stressed, and the only thing that truly calms me is drifting on the water, the engine humming under my feet, and the sun on my back. Cindy said she'd have a meeting around 9, so I figured I'd just swing by, grab the keys, maybe wave to her if she was free. No big deal. Then I reached her floor and realized it was unusually quiet. No voices, no typing, just the dull whoosh of central air. I walked down the hallway, saw her office door ajar. A voice in my head told me to knock, but I didn't. I just eased forward until I could see inside. That's when I noticed her chair shoved aside, not where it normally was. Something was off. My chest got tight, like a belt cinched around it. I could smell the stale coffee in the break room behind me, which somehow made everything feel more surreal. There was a slight squeak from inside, like shoes on the floor. One part of me said, "Step away. This isn't yours to see." Another part said, "No, you deserve to know." So I didn't move. I stood there, feeling my palms sweat. I breathed slow, quiet, trying not to make a sound. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd see. Maybe I already knew. Weird how life can pivot on a single second. You can live decades with someone, trusting them, loving them, and in one flash, everything changes. If I had turned around just then, decided, "Nah, I'll text her instead," I'd have left without seeing anything. I'd have gone home, made a sandwich, turned on the TV, completely oblivious to this undercurrent that was about to split my world open. But I didn't. I pushed the door a bit wider, careful, until I saw the two of them. I couldn't process it immediately. He was leaning against the desk, his pants around his thighs. She was on her knees, facing him. There was a buzzing fluorescent light overhead, making everything look cheap and harsh. And there was that hum from the vent. That was it. No conversation, no music, nothing except her soft choking sounds. She must have been trying to breathe around whatever was happening. My mind went blank. For a second, I thought maybe I was dreaming. Like this wasn't real life, not my wife of all people. I don't know how long I stood there. Probably just a few seconds, but it felt like an hour. Part of me was screaming inside, telling me to run in there, yell, break something, do anything. Another part felt numb, like I couldn't move my legs. The boss, the man I'd met maybe once at some company function, noticed me first. He made this half gasp, half grunt, and then Cindy turned around. She had tears streaming down her face, or maybe it was just her eyes watering. She looked humiliated, or maybe furious I'd come in. Couldn't tell. She pulled back, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, and managed to say, "It's not what you think." That sentence. It's the most ridiculous thing anyone can say in that situation. But she said it. Didn't even get up. She stayed on her knees, looking at me with wide eyes and that streak of something on her face. My heart was pounding so loud I thought the whole building could hear it. I might have said something, except nothing came out. My mouth was open, but I didn't speak. It was like I was strangled by the moment. Then I felt this burning in my gut, a heat that traveled up into my chest. The kind of rage that makes your hands shake. I could have shouted. Maybe I should have demanded an explanation. But I didn't. I just backed up, letting the door close in front of me, and I turned around. My legs were moving on autopilot, carrying me down that hallway, past the empty cubicles. I didn't remember breathing. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped in, pressed the button for the lobby. My reflection in the elevator walls looked pale, older, like I'd aged 10 years in a minute. I noticed my shirt was untucked on one side. Must have come loose as I stood there. By the time the doors opened on the first floor, I was almost calm, except calm isn't the right word. I was numb, like the shock had locked down my emotions. I walked out to my truck, started the engine, and just sat there for a second, not sure if I was going to cry, scream, or break the steering wheel with my hands. But nothing happened. I drove away, my mind blank. No phone calls, no music on the radio. Just the sound of the road under the tires. I headed out to my workshop instead of going home. The workshop was this old converted barn I'd been renting for years, a place where I stored tools and tinkered with things when I wanted time alone. I kept a few leftover items there, some old gear from my high school baseball days, a couple of dusty tarps, half-finished wood projects. I didn't go there often anymore. But that day, It felt like the only place I could hide. I pulled up, got out, and unlocked the door. The interior smelled like sawdust and rust. My eyes scanned the shelves until I found what I was looking for: a wooden baseball bat, chipped and scarred from decades of occasional use. I'd used it to knock a few balls around the yard with my brother. I didn't even think twice about why I needed it. I just knew I did. Something inside me told me I'd be seeing that boss again soon. I stayed there a while, leaning against my workbench, staring at that bat. My hands shook when I gripped it. I tried to figure out what was going on in my head, but it was too tangled. A part of me wanted to believe there was some insane explanation for what I'd witnessed, some bizarre misunderstanding. Another part of me replayed Cindy's words. "It's not what you think." But how else could I think about it? She was there, on her knees, and he was half-dressed, and there was no way to interpret that except the obvious. The image was burned into my mind, like a photograph that refused to fade. I stayed in that workshop until late afternoon. The sun set, shining bars of orange light through the dusty windows. I didn't feel like calling her. I couldn't imagine what she'd say if I did. I sure as hell didn't want to talk to him, her boss. My boss, too, in a way. He managed my department from a higher rung, never personally messing with my job. But we all knew who signed the checks. I felt betrayed, gutted, and something else, humiliated. Eventually, I drove home, half expecting to see Cindy's car in the driveway, but it wasn't there. I went inside, drank a glass of water, then sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blank wall. No TV, no music. Just silence. I guess that was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. Because once you see something like that, your life divides into before and after. And there's no going back. That next day, I woke up and realized I hadn't dreamed any of it. My hands were steady, but my mind was a storm. I got dressed, forced down some coffee, and left the house before Cindy came home. I didn't want to face her. Didn't want to see the look in her eyes or hear more of that. "Not what you think." Garbage. At work, I tried to focus on tasks, but my mind kept slipping back to that office, that open door, that moment she turned around with tears on her face. By lunchtime, I couldn't handle being around anyone else. So I left. I grabbed my truck keys and drove aimlessly, ended up at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Sat in a corner booth, sipping stale coffee, not tasting anything. That was the first time the thought of violence crept in clearly. I wanted to hurt him. The boss. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. I wanted to see his face when he realized he couldn't just do whatever the hell he wanted. The more I sat there, the more certain I became that I had to do something to make him feel the same shame I felt. Because if I didn't, I'd never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. I left some money on the table, walked out, and got back in my truck. Drove home, found Cindy sitting on the couch, eyes red from crying, but I didn't say a word. I just went upstairs, packed a small duffel bag, and left again. I didn't tell her where I was going. I don't know if she tried to stop me. I never looked back. My mind was set on one thing: that baseball bat was in my workshop, and I knew exactly how I was going to use it. I guess that's enough for a start. That's how it began. With the door left open, and a moment that changed my life forever. I wish I could say I handled it better, that I walked away and didn't do anything foolish. But I'm just a man. A flawed, angry man who felt his world collapse in a matter of seconds. So that's where this story really starts, with me, standing in that hallway, heart pounding, realizing I wasn't who I thought I was. Or maybe I was just discovering who I'd always been. I'm not sure which. All I know is that I never felt the same after that day. I didn't plan any big confrontation that afternoon. I just knew I needed time to let the rage settle, or at least find a place to put it. I drove out to the edge of town, sat by the river for a while, tossing pebbles into the water, thinking about what I'd seen. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Cindy, who I thought I knew better than anyone. Cindy, who I trusted. And him, someone in a position of power. It made my skin crawl. The next turn came when I finally decided to do something about it. That was the day everything escalated. It started quietly enough, me at the workshop, rummaging through my old tools, looking at the bat again. Then the thought formed, solid as a rock. I'm going to make him pay. I'm not proud of it, but I can't pretend it didn't happen. Let me lay it out as plainly as I can. I knew where he lived. Most of us did, in a roundabout way. Small town, not many secrets if you know where to look. He had this single-story house, kind of fancy for our area, with a neat front yard and a 2-car garage. He lived alone, that much I knew for sure. No wife, no roommate. That day, I didn't go straight over. I spent hours pacing around, talking to myself like a lunatic, gripping that baseball bat until my palms were sore. I'd set it down, try to tell myself to walk away, then pick it up again. I kept seeing Cindy on her knees, the tears in her eyes, the way her voice sounded when she said, "It's not what you think." My blood boiled. My stomach churned. I wondered if he forced her somehow, if she felt trapped. But even if that was true, I couldn't see past the betrayal. By early evening, I'd made up my mind. I threw the bat in the back of my truck. It rattled around, rolling over some old cans. I didn't drive fast. I was calm in a robotic kind of way, like a man who's convinced himself he's got no other choice. I parked a block down from his house, out of sight, engine ticking in the quiet street. A neighbor's dog barked at me, then gave up. Overhead, the sky was a dull gray, promising rain but not delivering. I sat there for a moment, watching the lights in his living room. Then I got out, grabbed the bat and walked. The plan wasn't elaborate. I'd knock on the door. When he answered, I'd let him have it. I didn't think about the aftermath. Jail time, lawsuits, losing my job, none of it mattered in that moment. All I could see was his smug face, how he must have laughed at me behind my back. There's a line inside a person that once crossed, logic doesn't stand a chance. I knocked once. There was a pause, then I heard footsteps. The door opened, and he stood there, looking surprised. He didn't know what to say. I didn't give him a chance. I lifted the bat and swung low, catching him right in the knee. It wasn't a graceful move, no practiced stance, just pure anger. He let out a scream, collapsing sideways into the doorframe. I heard a crack, like bone or wood splitting, and my heart pounded harder. He shouted something, but I barely heard him. I swung again, connecting with his leg a second time, just to make sure. Then I stepped back, panting. He rolled on the floor, clutching his knee, face twisted in agony. For a second, I thought I might go further, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring down at him, feeling a sick sense of release and revulsion at the same time. I said one thing. "If they fire you, sorry about that, boss." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow. Then I walked away, the bat dragging along the carpet before I picked it up and stepped outside. I got in my truck and drove off. I didn't look back to see if he was crawling to the phone or trying to stand. My hands shook on the steering wheel, and adrenaline roared in my ears. But I kept driving, past the quiet houses and closed stores, past the dim streetlights, all the way to my garage. That night, I drank in silence, with the garage door open. I had a 6-pack of cheap beer and a folding chair. I just sat there, staring into the darkness, the bat leaning against the wall behind me. It was the ugliest feeling, knowing I'd done that, but also feeling a grim satisfaction that I'd stood up for myself, even if it was in the worst possible way. Every now and then, I thought about Cindy. Where was she now? At home, crying? Or maybe she was trying to explain to the cops that she didn't know where I was? I didn't care at that moment. The beer went down quick, and the night dragged on, each minute darker than the last. Around dawn, I finally dragged myself inside the house. Cindy's car was there. She must have come home sometime during the night. I didn't see her. I went upstairs, collapsed on the bed, and woke up hours later to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was a text from my brother, asking if I was okay. News travels fast in a small place like ours. I guess the boss must have called 911 or ended up in the hospital, and word got around. I met my brother for lunch the next day. He looked worried, kept glancing around like someone might overhear us. "What happened?" he asked. I told him straight. I did something stupid. He didn't scold me. He just sighed, nodded, and said, "You sure you're ready for the fallout?" I wasn't, but it was too late to go back. That was the year everything else started to unravel. My brother got diagnosed with cancer a few months after that lunch. It started in his lungs, then spread fast. He went downhill quicker than anyone expected. By the time he was in the hospital, he couldn't hold a conversation for long without getting winded. I spent many evenings at his bedside, all the nonsense about work or marriage temporarily shoved aside. Because when someone you love is dying, you realize how petty certain things can be. I mean, yeah, what Cindy did, what I saw, wasn't petty. But compared to losing my brother, it was small in that moment. The doctors tried chemo, radiation, all the usual. But nothing stuck. He shrank into a shadow of himself, and all I could do was hold his hand sometimes, or bring him watery coffee from the vending machine. I felt guilty for all the times I should have visited him before he was sick, but didn't because I was caught up in my own drama. Regret piles up, doesn't it? A year to the day after I found Cindy and her boss, my brother died. We buried him in a modest cemetery just outside town. The funeral was plain, close friends and family. Cindy was there, standing off to the side. We hadn't spoken much since the incident, though we still lived in the same house. It was like we existed in parallel, never intersecting. She'd come in late, leave early. We avoided each other's eyes in the morning. I was numb mostly. At the wake, everyone gathered in a cramped funeral home, standing around, sharing half-hearted stories about my brother. That's when Cindy's sister came over. I never knew her well. She lived a few states away, rarely visited. She looked nervous, chewing her lip. Finally she said, "Can I talk to you a minute?" I nodded, followed her to a corner. She said, "You know why she did it, right?" I had no clue what she was talking about, so I shrugged. She looked at me with this pity in her eyes, which irritated me. "He threatened to have you fired," she whispered. "Her boss. He told her it was either your job or that. So she did it for you." My mind went blank, like I couldn't absorb what she was saying. "That doesn't make sense," I muttered. She insisted it was true, that Cindy had told her everything in tears one night after it happened. She tried to fix it, tried to protect me from a layoff that the company was planning. She thought if she did that, maybe the boss would spare me. I felt my pulse in my temples. Rage and confusion mixed together until I couldn't speak. I just stared at her sister, who finally put a hand on my arm. "She chose you," she said. "She gave herself up so you wouldn't be the one out of a job." Then she walked away, leaving me standing there, the sounds of quiet mourning all around. I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. I wandered outside, leaning against the funeral home's brick wall, trying to breathe. If what her sister said was true, then Cindy hadn't just been cheating for the thrill of it. She'd been cornered, forced. But that didn't erase the image in my head of her on her knees, or the shame I felt, or what I'd done in response. Nothing changed the fact that I went to the boss's house and smashed his knee to pieces. I wasn't a hero in any of this. I was just a broken man who reacted with violence instead of understanding. We buried my brother that afternoon. I stood by his grave, thinking about how short life can be, how easily we can destroy each other. Cindy stood a few steps away, looking small and hollow. I didn't say a word to her. I just watched the coffin get lowered into the ground, wondering if my brother could see us from wherever he was, shaking his head at the mess I'd made of my life. That night, I slept alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed a few times, friends offering condolences, but I ignored them. The only thing I could think about was Cindy's face that day in the office, and how maybe I'd never really known the full story. Maybe I still didn't. After the funeral, I stayed quiet. Cindy and I barely spoke. We existed like strangers, sharing a house but not a life. She tried to talk to me once or twice, maybe to explain, but I waved her off. I couldn't bear to hear excuses, and I wasn't ready to believe there might be something more behind it all. A month passed. Then two. The tension hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. I went to work, kept my head down, did my shifts, came home, avoided her. On weekends I drove out to the workshop and hammered at some old wood, pointlessly. I guess you could say I was trying to punish her by shutting down any chance for us to communicate. But in truth, I was punishing myself, too. Because every night I went to bed, all I could see was that open door, that moment her sister's words hit me. She did it for you. The weight of that was heavy as hell. Finally, one evening, after I'd come back from the workshop, I found Cindy in the kitchen. She looked worn out, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She said, "Can we talk?" I stared at her for a moment, then nodded. She started to speak, but nothing came out. We just stood there, the refrigerator humming in the background. Then she said, "Please let me explain." I didn't respond. I felt my jaw clench. She sighed, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I knew they were laying people off," she whispered. "He made a threat. Said he'd make sure it was you. I tried to beg him not to." Her voice cracked. She wiped her cheeks, trembling. It hurt to watch, but I couldn't let go of the anger. "You could have told me," I said, my voice rough. "You could have warned me." She shook her head, tears falling. "I thought I could handle it on my own. I was scared. I didn't want you to lose your job." I felt like something inside me twisted. Part of me believed her. Part of me hated her for not trusting me enough to figure it out together. We stood there in silence. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. The old me might have taken her hand, tried to comfort her. But that man was gone. I just turned and left the room. I don't even remember going to bed that night. I just know I slept badly, images swirling in my head, the boss's sneer, her eyes filled with tears, my brother's coffin. I woke up the next morning determined to do something different, though. I couldn't keep rotting in this house like a ghost. So I told Cindy, "We're going fishing this weekend." She looked at me, surprised, unsure if I was serious. But I just repeated it. "Saturday morning, be ready?" She nodded, eyes flickering with a mix of hope and worry. Saturday came, gray skies reflecting how I felt inside. We loaded up the boat without talking much. She tried to catch my eye, but I stayed focused on the tasks. I was calm, too calm maybe, like a man who'd decided to settle a score in his own twisted way. Because I had a plan. It wasn't a conscious, well-thought-out plan, but the anger inside me needed an outlet. The boat motor sputtered to life, and we headed out into the middle of the lake, the breeze cutting across the water. We found a small island there, a patch of land with a few trees and bushes, maybe big enough to roam around but not large enough for anyone to hide. Sometimes people camped there, though not often. I steered the boat, my face blank, while Cindy sat across from me, glancing nervously at my expression. When we docked, she looked around, confusion in her eyes. "Why here?" she asked. I shrugged. "Just felt like the right spot," I said, and stepped onto the shore. I motioned for her to follow. She did, hugging herself against the chill. We walked a few yards in. I had a small recorder in my pocket, one of those digital devices I use for notes at work sometimes. Before we left, I'd recorded a snippet of Cindy's sister talking at the funeral, the part where she said, "She did it for you." I'd coaxed her into repeating it over the phone so I could have it saved. Cindy didn't know that. I stood by an old fallen tree, rummaging for something in my jacket. She was about to ask what I was doing when I hit play. Her sister's voice came out scratchy but clear. "She did it for you. She didn't want you fired." Cindy stared at me, tears already forming. She recognized her sister's voice. The recorder crackled, repeating the words about how the boss had threatened me, about how Cindy thought it was the only way to keep my job safe. I let it play through. Neither of us said anything. Then I clicked it off. Cindy covered her face with her hands, sobbing. The sound of her crying mixed with the breeze and the distant hum of the boat engine. For a moment I just stood there, feeling hollow. Then I leaned in and said, "Now you know how it feels to watch and not say a damn thing." My voice was cold, almost toneless. She lifted her head, eyes wet, lips quivering. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking, but I stepped back. Without another word, I walked toward the boat. She scrambled after me, panic in her eyes. "Wait, what are you doing?" I kept walking. "Please!" she screamed, grabbing at my sleeve. I pulled free, hopped into the boat, started the engine. She stood on the bank, her shoes sinking into the wet sand, watching me with this horrified expression that's burned into my memory. She must have understood in that instant that I was leaving her there. With no phone, no way off. I pulled away from the shore, the boat's motor slicing through the water. I could still see her, just a shape on the beach, arms raised, yelling something. The wind carried her words away. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but I kept going. A part of me felt a surge of triumph, like I'd finally shown her the pain I'd endured. Another part felt sick, like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I reached the dock, tied up, then got in my truck and drove home. The entire ride, my mind replayed her face over and over. I tried to swallow the guilt, telling myself she'd be fine. It was just an island, not the middle of the ocean. Eventually, someone would come by or she'd find a way to signal for help. Still, a cold pit formed in my stomach, growing with each mile. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, phone on the table, waiting for it to ring. Part of me half expected the police to show up at my door. Another part of me wondered if she was safe, or if she'd been rescued yet. My mind spun in circles until dawn broke, gray and bleak. The next day, I heard from a neighbor that some rescue folks were out on the lake, found a woman on that island. She was disoriented, dehydrated, but alive. Turned out she'd spent 2 days there. No lasting physical harm, but I imagined the psychological damage was done. My stomach churned hearing that. I knew I'd taken things too far, but it was already done. After they found her, I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I packed a couple duffel bags and rented a cheap apartment on the other side of town. Cindy recovered physically, but I never visited to check. I heard she was quiet, wouldn't talk much about what happened on the island. If the cops wanted to question me, they never got around to it. Maybe she kept her mouth shut. Maybe she felt she owed me that much, I don't know. I lived in that shabby place for a while, working my shifts, coming home to a futon and a silent TV. I didn't tell anyone my address. A few close friends tried calling, but I didn't pick up. I sank into myself, half ashamed, half relieved to be rid of the constant reminder of what we'd both done. I'd see Cindy sometimes in my mind, kneeling on that office floor, then again on that island, reaching for me as I drifted away. The two images melded, like a nightmare I couldn't shake. Months passed. I guess we were technically still married. No papers were filed, no official separation. But it was over in all the ways that matter. She never tried to find me, never left a note on my truck's windshield. I think she understood there was no going back. We'd crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. She betrayed me, or so I believed. Then I betrayed her in return, and I did it in a way that stripped away any moral high ground I might have had. I wasn't some guy to cheer for. I was just a bitter, damaged man who lashed out. In the quiet of my apartment, I'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, soaked in sweat, the memory of her face haunting me. Not just from the office or the island, but from the years before, all those mundane evenings watching TV, the way she'd rub my shoulders after a tough day, the way she'd make chili on Sundays, humming to herself. The simple gestures that told me she cared. Now all I had left were those echoes, and they hurt worse than anything else. I thought about calling her, but I never did. If I dialed her number, I'd just sit there with my thumb hovering over the call button, then cancel. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't tear us both apart again. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. Sometimes I wondered if the boss had fully recovered, if he was back at work, if his knee ever healed. Word around the company was that he left the position soon after. Maybe he couldn't handle the shame of hobbling around on a cane, or maybe they quietly forced him out to avoid a scandal. I didn't ask, and nobody told me. People at my level either didn't know or didn't care. By the end of that year, I was just about done with the entire town. Every corner held a memory, and every memory hurt. I packed up and moved to a small place outside the city limits. Nothing fancy, a one-story ranch with a gravel driveway. The realtor didn't ask questions, and I didn't volunteer any answers. It was just me, a few boxes of old clothes, and a mattress on the floor. I found a new job doing maintenance at a local warehouse. Decent pay, no nonsense. Clock in, do my tasks, clock out. No time for gossip or rumors. That first night in the new place, I sat on a battered lawn chair in the backyard, staring at the night sky. I felt that familiar hollowness creep in. I remember the rustle of the wind through the trees, the creak of the chair under my weight, and the distant hum of traffic. I must have sat there for hours, thinking about how everything can change in a heartbeat. One day, you're a normal guy with a wife, a job, and a routine. The next day, you're an angry fool who's destroyed everything you thought you were protecting. Occasionally, I'd catch myself wanting to blame Cindy all over again, if she'd just told me, if she'd come to me before letting that boss get his way. But deep down, I knew I had my share of blame. My reaction was my choice. No matter what she did, I chose violence, and I chose to leave her in a cruel way. That's on me. You can't wash that kind of guilt off your hands easily. It stains. Over time, I settled into a life of solitude. No better, no worse, just different. Some nights, I'd dream about the lake, about that island. I'd see her standing there, arms outstretched, but when I tried to speak, no words came out. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. In those moments, I'd think maybe I should track her down, offer some kind of apology, or at least an explanation. Then I'd shake my head, telling myself it was too late. I heard she moved away eventually. Her sister mentioned it in a text, a short message that just said Cindy was trying to start over somewhere else. I never replied. I couldn't find the words. What do you say after all that? I'm sorry. Doesn't feel like enough. Maybe it never will be. These days I live alone in that small ranch house. I keep to myself. I'm not a recluse, but I don't go out much besides work and the occasional run to the grocery store. Sometimes neighbors will wave, and I'll wave back, but I don't strike up conversations. I guess I'm a guy with too many memories and not enough excuses. I can't say I've found peace. I'm just existing, day to day. Mornings are the hardest. I'll wake up before dawn, lying there in the dim light, feeling the weight of everything that's happened. I see Cindy's face at random moments. The way she looked in that office, the way she looked when I left her on that island, and sometimes the way she used to look when she laughed at my corny jokes back in our early days. That last one stings the most, because it reminds me there was a time we both smiled without any bitterness. I'm not looking for pity. I'm just telling you how it is. People assume life has these neat resolutions, like you make a grand gesture, or you learn some big moral lesson that wipes the slate clean. That's not true. You carry the consequences of your actions, especially the bad ones. They become part of you, like scars on your skin. Some days you manage to forget them for a while. Other days they remind you exactly who you are. I'm not a hero. Never was. I'm just a man who messed up in a world that's messy to begin with. Sometimes, on weekends, I'll drive out to the lake. Not to that island. I won't set foot there again, but just near the shore. I sit on a rock, watch the water ripple. If the sky is clear, I might see a few boats drifting by. Families, friends, couples enjoying the day, making memories while they can. I listen to the sound of the wind, the buzz of insects in the tall grass. I think about my brother, gone too soon. I think about what he'd say if he saw me now. Probably tell me to stop beating myself up, to find a new path. But that's easier said than done. I haven't picked up that baseball bat since the night I used it on the boss. I don't even know where it ended up, to be honest. Maybe it's still somewhere in my workshop, collecting dust. I can't bring myself to look for it. Too many bad memories soaked into that wood. Once in a while, I'll be sipping my morning coffee, and I'll catch a glimpse of my own reflection in the window. I see an older man, tired around the eyes, hair going gray at the temples. A part of me wonders if there's still a chance to make amends, to find some shred of forgiveness. But that requires reaching out, admitting fault, risking the pain of rejection or more accusations. I haven't found the courage to do that yet. Maybe I never will. Do I regret what I did? Yes. But if you're asking whether I'd do it differently if I could go back, I'm not entirely sure. That's the twisted part. When your pride is stabbed, and you feel that overwhelming sense of betrayal, you're capable of things you never imagined. And afterward, you look at yourself in the mirror and realize you don't even recognize your own eyes. That's me now. An echo of who I was. I live one day at a time, which is cliché, but it's the only way I know. I work, I eat, I sleep, and in between, I wrestle with the ghosts of what happened. Cindy's ghost is the loudest, even though she's very much alive somewhere out there. I hear her voice sometimes in the silence, telling me it wasn't what I thought. Telling me she never meant to hurt me. And then I remember I never gave her the chance to fix any of it. I jumped straight to revenge. I let my rage speak louder than her pleas. Nights are quieter now than they ever were. No second voice in the house. No footsteps on the stairs. Sometimes I miss the sound of her breathing in the next room, the simple comfort of not being alone. But I chose this. I have to own that. So I sit in that silence, and it reminds me of the day I opened that office door and heard nothing but the hum of the air vent before my whole world broke apart. I don't know if I believe in fate or destiny. Probably not. I think we make our own choices, and we pay for them. My choice was to handle betrayal with violence, to meet humiliation with cruelty. Cindy's choice was to protect me in the only way she thought possible, even if it meant degrading herself. Her boss's choice was to leverage his power over her. We all did what we did, and nobody came out clean. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything, really. Just telling you how it went down, plain as I can, because holding it in any longer doesn't make sense. I was a man who saw his wife in a position that shattered his pride. I reacted with my fists, or a bat to be precise, and now I live with the aftermath. That's the truth, unvarnished. I don't sleep well, I don't smile much, and the days bleed into each other. But I'm here, breathing, existing in this middle ground where life goes on, even when you wish it might stop for a bit. Sometimes people ask me, "Don't you hate her?" Or, "Don't you wish you could have your old life back?" I don't have a neat answer. Hate is a strong word, and my feelings towards Cindy are tangled. As for having my old life back, that's impossible. It died the moment I stepped into that hallway. All we can do is move forward, dragging our baggage behind us. Maybe one day I'll lighten the load. Maybe I'll find a reason to apologize, to show her that I finally understand why she did what she did. But for now, I'm just letting the days pass. I wake up, go to work, come home, and sometimes I sit in the yard, looking at the sky. I remember her face then, not with anger, just with a dull ache. Because I finally get it. She wasn't betraying me for some thrill. She was trying to save me, in a twisted kind of way. And I wasn't strong enough to see past my own bruised ego. Now I'm just one more man who can't fix what's broken. It's not heroism. It's not tragedy in a classic sense. It's just life, real and raw. I don't know if that answers all your questions, but it's everything I've got. From the open door to the hush of that office, to the bat hitting his knee, to leaving her on that island, to now, living alone in a small house where the lights feel too bright at night. That's the story. I won't dress it up or make it sound noble. It's just how it happened. And I remember every detail. That's all I can tell you. The rest is just me, day by day, trying to breathe under the weight of what I did, and what I lost.